Hi, my name is Stephen Mathenia, and I'm one of the co-hosts of Cult Hackers. I was born and raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, having left when I was about 30. When my daughter was born, who is one of the hosts on this podcast. I'm now trained as an organizational psychologist, and so I'm very interested in how organizations work, particularly cults, and also how people make sense of the world after leaving. So that's a very interesting topic that I think we're going to cover today. So this is a very interesting and special episode, which is going to take a format that we haven't really tried before. So today is primarily about the people involved in the making of and producing of Witness Underground, which we've mentioned before. It's a very cool documentary film about a group of young Jehovah's Witnesses who start their own indie record label, and their story of leaving and finding a creative life, finally free of the restrictive doctrines and practices. So today I'm going to be speaking to the team who are working hard to get this film out there onto the big streaming platforms and promote it to get it out to as many people as possible. And some of the guests today will have been directly involved in the making of the film, and others will be people who are part of the team promoting it, who themselves have fascinating stories and cool projects. So we're going to hear from some of those people today. Right. Okay. So first of all, we're going to welcome Anthony. Anthony, your name is very similar to mine, but perhaps more flourishing. Anthony Mathenia, is that right?
Yeah, I guess so. No, we say Mathenia here,
Oh,
but
Mathenia. Okay.
I've heard it about 20 different ways all my life, so I don't know.
Well, as somebody who always gets Mather or Mather or Mather, or yeah, I know the
Yeah.
feeling. Anyway, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. We've also got here Denise, and we're going to speak to Denise a bit more detail later, but just say hello, Denise. Otherwise, it's going to look strange. You're just sat there. So, welcome, Denise.
Hey, Stephen. Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Cool name, Cult Hackers. Loving it.
Thank you very much. So, welcome, Denise. And we've got the man of the moment himself, Scott Homan, who's just arrived as well. So, welcome, Scott. Thanks for coming and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I know I'm not like on the schedule yet, so I'm happy to pop back off, but
that's cool. Well, you're absolutely welcome. We're going to start with Anthony because he's got a bit of a time restriction. So, Anthony, thanks for coming on. Do you want to just give us a very potted history? How you ended up, I suppose. How did all the things happen to you that made you end up on this podcast right now? So, what happens?
Wow, that's a very long story, so I'll condense it. I was raised third generation Jehovah's Witness, and stayed there through most of my young adult life. In the early 2000s, I got involved with the nuclear gopher scene. That's pictured in the documentary Witness Underground. I ended up leaving the religion pretty much the same time Ryan Sutter did, who's featured in the documentary. And then had a bunch of wild and crazy adventures over the years, found out about Scott's work with Witness Underground, and watched the documentary, totally floored, blown away by it. It was amazing. And so I was happy to reconnect with Ryan and some of the other people and get behind this important documentary.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So one of the questions I want to ask everybody on this podcast today is, why you're so interested in this project, and what is it about the project that kind of resonated with you? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Right. For nostalgia's sake, I mean, I'm all on board with Witness Underground. I mean, I wasn't there for the whole time that's covered in the documentary, but for a little bit of it, I knew these individuals in it. And honestly, as I look back at my Witness experience, being involved in that was the absolute high point, because I guess like a lot of creative minded people or weirdos or misfits that, put on the JCPenney suit, but still don't always fit in. You never felt celebrated in the congregation for your creativity. It was looked down upon. Oh, why is this person writing a book? Why are they playing music? But getting involved with the folks at Nuclear Gopher there in Minneapolis was a whole different thing. We went up and played the October Riz show that's featured in the documentary a little bit, that was the first time I ever felt celebrated by my witness community. And it kind of gave me back then this idea of like, wow, I can be a creative person and be a Jehovah's Witness. Well, I guess long term that doesn't ultimately work out, but at least at the time, it gave me some hope that I could pursue my dreams. And I think a large part of what this documentary is about is that, no matter what your circumstances are in life, it may not even be Jehovah's Witnesses. You may have difficult circumstances in life. Creativity will get you through it, and creativity will help you build a better life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of feel that way, especially if they have those creative juices. And in a way, you've got double jeopardy if you're a highly creative person and slightly, well, you described yourself or people like you as misfits. If you're a misfit in Jehovah's Witnesses, then that's particularly tough, isn't it? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are already isolated in many respects from the community, and then the only little bit of community you've got left, you don't quite fit. I think that's a really hard place to be.
Oh, I would agree. You feel like a minority within a minority.
Yeah.
And just around people that you feel like don't always get you. And they throw around that term, oh, you're weird. Well, I celebrate that term now, but at the time it was like an insult. Oh, why are they saying I'm weird? What do I need to do differently? I'll tie a better knot for my tie or something. I don't know.
So what was it that made you feel that way? I mean, if people are telling you that, I guess that's going to be a bit of a clue. But why? What is it about you that made people think, he's not quite the same as the other witnesses?
I don't know. I think it's just that creative mindset. Creative people, like it's in the documentary, they can be a little eccentric or quirky or something like that. I think within, high control groups, cults and something, there's this idea if you've got to fit this mold, here's the mold, here's the template, here's the polo shirt, here's the khakis.
Yes.
And if you're interested in writing a novel or recording an album or something like that, or painting a picture, these are not normal Jehovah's Witness activities. And like, I didn't know too many people like me. And like, even like, there might be an older sister in the congregation who paints that everybody thinks she's weird because she paints and she sings opera and stuff. It's not like open, like hostility, but just kind of a blanketed kind of like looking at you one way or another. And then what always happened for me is like, whenever I tried to pursue anything creatively, inevitably you get shut down by the elder body or my father or a circuit overseer or, somebody would ultimately come along and say, oh, it's time to stop this. It's too worldly. It's too this, it's too that.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things I want to pick up there. One is the philosophy, a sort of philosophical question, I suppose, that when you're in a group like Jehovah's Witnesses, it is you are expected to fit into quite a conservative type of view of the world. They're not a group that encourages risk taking or thinking outside of whatever you're being taught. Actually the thinking is done by the governing body, and the elders then transmit that to the rest of us, and we're not really supposed to get too engaged with all these difficult questions. But I guess when you're creative, you're thinking all the time. So it's not just the art that you're producing, you're also doing a lot of thinking, which is not encouraged.
Oh, I agree. I think that people who can think creatively about a painting or a music or a book or a sculpture or something like that, they're wired to think outside of the box. So the documentary really helped me put into context that, because I hadn't really ever thought about it that way. But seeing that, it was like, well, yeah, no wonder there was this kind of blowback all the time. It's like a creative person will eventually start asking very creative questions about the group they're in. And I think that's inevitable.
Yeah, it's partly because as a creative, I think you can imagine other worlds in such a vivid way and other ways of thinking about things. That's not really what they want.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of what you were into when you were a Jehovah's Witness, what sort of music were you into? What sort of art were you doing?
Yeah, my main thing has always been writing.
Okay.
That was what I was most into.
Okay.
I tell these little stories about the time I wrote my first short story and was really proud. It's probably cringy to look back, but at the time I was very proud. My first
Mhm.
short story. And parents wanted to see it. Okay, well, here comes the little highlighter, like they're the worst editor. Oh, why'd you use this word here? Well, let's think about
Mhm.
this here. A time I had my conversation with my dad, when I'm in high school, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? I think I'd like to write a novel. Well, let's think about this. Is that really
Mhm.
something that a Jehovah's Witness should be doing? So I was kind of always that was shut down. I would say like in the 90s when Nirvana came out with Smells Like Teen Spirit and everybody I knew suddenly had a guitar. That was kind of when I got into music.
Yeah.
First doing, Weezer Nirvana covers, but then ultimately, as a creative person, doing covers gets boring. So you start writing your own stuff. What we were doing at the time around the Nuclear Gopher era was electro pop, um, synthesizers, loud, crunchy guitars, a drum machine, and pretty female vocals type
I
stuff.
remember at the you mentioned Nirvana there. So at that time I had a little wedding band, like that was one of the few times you could play music was at weddings. So I had a little wedding band and we went in this little caravanette thing
Yeah,
to the venue. It was really exciting. And one of the guys there, the bass player, he had a copy of that Nirvana track, so it was new at the time. And
yeah.
yeah, that really worried me. It was a very disturbing thing, that, because it was so exciting as a piece of music, as a track. It's like something you never heard before, but it sounded wrong, really. There's something about it that just didn't. It was like, it really bothered me hearing that.
I'll tell you just a funny little Nirvana story,
Yeah.
because like we were also the kind of kids like in Nuclear Gopher where we'd always have out the camcorder, doing
Yeah.
puppet shows or something. So we decided, oh, we'd make a little, Nirvana-esque music video. And one of my friends there in the congregation, I guess he'd seen Kurt Cobain wear a dress or something and something. So
Oh
he
gosh.
he grabbed a dress and
Oh.
we were all costumed up. So yeah, once again, parents see it and like, oh no,
Mhm.
we got to get the elders involved. They're all becoming homosexuals because of this rock music. And it's just,
Yeah.
you look back and you laugh, but it's just like that was just par for the course of how things
Yeah.
tended to go.
Just so suppressing of your any little hint of creativity or anything. I was interested in plot lines. So when you're writing, if you're writing a novel, clearly a lot of the problems stem from what sort of person is your protagonist going to be, I should think. And how do we want to be rooting for this guy because he's he's not a good guy, and there's lots of immorality in lots of the popular novels and stuff. Did that sort of restrict your creative juices?
It did and it didn't. The first thing I ever wrote was a screenplay called Truth, which was basically my take on a Jehovah's Witness drama, but I wanted to
Oh
do
wow.
one that was like realistic, because the dramas were always so cheesy and weird. But I wanted, okay, let's do a real, movie script of
Mhm.
what it's like to be a Jehovah's Witness. It's a very Jehovah's Witness script for sure, but it was at least honest in a portrayal of what it was to be a teen in that era.
Mhm.
But most of my other writing, though, I did, with the intent that nobody would ever see it,
Right.
just as a creative outlook. I wasn't writing novels just to be like, oh, I'm going to get this published, I'm going to be a New York Times bestseller. It was just something I had to get out of me. So
Yeah.
my first novel I wrote, it's still unpublished, and will always be unpublished, but that was one I did write as a Jehovah's Witness. And looking back, it's very clearly a book about a lot of masturbation guilt, I think. That
Yes,
manuscript
I
was
remember
called
that well.
it was that manuscript was called With Fingers and Other Instruments. So yeah. I'm sorry if I'm being too edgy for your show, but I'm just
No,
being
no,
honest.
that's absolutely fine.
But
Yeah.
when I did get out of the Jehovah's Witness, though, my thing was like, okay, finally I'm free. Finally I can pursue actually having a book published for people to read. And I was very fortunate to be able to tick that off the list.
Right, brilliant. Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about some of your interesting projects that you're involved in as well. So yeah, tell us about the book and what sort of things you're doing.
So back then, I feel like when you get out of the witnesses, you have a lot of thoughts, questions, emotions, feelings, and as a creative person, you're going to get it out some way. You're going to write a song about it, or
Yeah.
in my case, I wrote a book, and I know several other people that have. My first novel to be published was called Paradise Earth Day Zero, and it was a speculative fiction. I think as witnesses, we always thought, oh, what would the paradise be like? Oh, what's it going to be like? That was our favorite hobby. And I started thinking, okay, what would an Armageddon experience actually be like? What would it be like to, live through an event that's basically the mass murder of everybody? And then on top of that, your foray into the new world is, okay, we're going to clean up all the bodies, we're going to clean up all the debris.
Yeah.
So I was thinking realistically about their end of days, their, eschatology. And I wanted to make a speculative fiction about that. So I got that published. I followed that up with Happiness, Next Exit, to kind of lighten the mood. It was a Jehovah's Witness romance novel. Technically Jehovah's Witnesses were not supposed to read romances, but my grandmother had a whole shelf full of them. So that was kind of my little loving tribute to my grandmother. But it was also, even though the main character is female, it was pretty loosely a ripoff of my life and my exit from the religion. And
what else are you doing?
So after I got done doing novels, I got into comic book creating, working with a great bunch of kids. We called her Stash. And then, it had that kind of vibe that Nuclear Gopher had, that kind of DIY, let's all get together, we're a bunch of weirdos, let's do something cool. So we published so many comic books, graphic novels, anthologies. So that was a big part of my life. And all that's kind of been a segue into, or a stepping stone into what I'm doing now, where I'm working for independently, but for a book publisher, Guerrilla Convict. They mostly do true crime sort of thing. And my latest step has been into the world of documentary film with Outlaw Films. They do kind of like counterculture, crime type stuff. So we just had come out Dope Men, America's First Drug Cartel, which is an exploration into the history of the war on drugs and these Prohibition era mobsters that were kind of the first kingpins that in the illicit narcotic trade. So I did art and animation for that. And I'm currently working on, which should be coming out early next year, or actually the end of this year, I believe. It is A Tortured Mind, the Reality of Post-Incarceration Syndrome. And it's kind of through the lens of a guy who's no longer with us, Ryan Leone. It looks at his story, but the larger story of how drug offenders are treated in the American criminal justice system, and kind of the tolls and the PTSD that come from placing nonviolent people into very violent situations.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very eclectic mix of activities today.
Ask me next year and I'll be like, oh, I'm making a sculpture now. I'm done with film. No, it's just always had this drive to catch up for lost time, and there's been a lot of things I had to do over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm achieving them, ticking off the list.
Do you think that I used to think about myself as kind of an observer? Even when I was a witness, I felt that one of the things I could bring to something was that I looked at things as if from a slightly removed situation, because of the fact that we were in the world but no part of the world. Do you still feel that you've kind of got that ability?
Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, being an observer is exactly a good way to, I mean, like any good writer is going to be an observer.
Yeah.
You're listening to how people talk, and being a witness, you met a lot of different people in the ministry. Lots of different people, even though, and you can be their best friend, but you can sit there and kind of study them, I guess. And then, I spent a good many years bartending, so that's kind of another way to get involved. And I just like meeting people. It's like I don't care what their background is or what they're coming from. Everybody's got a story to tell. And as storytellers, it's kind of our job to listen and learn so that we can communicate that accurately.
Yeah, I think that semi-detached feeling, I still feel it anyway. Maybe I'm on my own, but I feel like I I'm never quite fully immersed in society. I am part of it now. I vote. I have political opinions. I get involved in those things, but it still feels slightly like there's a bit of distance there. I don't know where that's just, it could be my personality. I don't know, but it feels like that's part of that conditioning that we had.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like, and I don't know if I definitely relate. I don't know if that's a permanent thing. One of my biggest realizations of late is like, okay, just because you've disavowed the faithful and discreet slave or 1914 or whatever, and the governing body's bullshit, just because you did that 10 years ago, there's a lot of underlying programming
Yeah.
that still remains, how you react to just life situations. I'm having to look at it and say, I'm reacting this way because it reminds me of the time two elders came over, or something like
Yeah.
that. And it can be innocent things in life. Someone just wants to pop by for coffee. You're like, oh, why are they really coming over? What do they really want to talk about?
Is it a return visit?
Yeah, so it's like I think for those of us that have been out for a while, it might be a good time to start examining our little personality things. It's like, is this still a little bit of watchtower hanging on? Whether we completely root it out or not. I mean, I was born into it, like I said, third generation. So I don't know. Nature or nurture, I got hit both ways with it.
Absolutely, me too. I'm exactly the same. I still live in the same city that I was raised in, as a Jehovah's Witness, and where I pioneered, trunched around those streets. So last year was a difficult year for me, and I sort of felt everywhere I went. I was doing a lot of cycling, and everywhere I went, things reminded me, oh, that's where that root call was that I used to go to. That's where I used to take my mum to that root call. And oh, that brother used to work over there and live over there. And that kingdom hall I helped build, which is now an Islamic center, and I was just sort of, it was constantly reminding me of that life. So yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, well, I did a thing which I'm starting to see that some people do, is just leave the area.
Yeah.
So I jumped across the country and had 10 very action-packed years of trying to find myself, in a world that was, one I was thrust into and didn't really always understand the ground rules for.
Yeah. And you're kind of living off the grid a bit now, apparently. You said to me you're creating a paradise in your own backyard.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, it's a weird thing going on in this country. Everybody's traveling around, especially these days. But my wife and I, she's an artist. We've worked, as bartenders for many, many years. But we had to get a piece of land, and we thought we need to devote ourselves at this time in life. The kids are raised. It's time to focus on us. So we need to be creating. So if that means living in a tent in the woods, as long as we can write and play music and make art, then we'll be happy. But we've been constructing, we're making the paradise, basically. The Jehovah's Witnesses don't want to help. I've invited them to come help us. Like, come on, you've been saying we're going to make this paradise. Here we go. But I mean, I joke about it, but it's like, it's such a silly thing. Oh, we're going to turn the earth into a paradise. Well, you can do that today. You could get a piece of land in some beautiful area and put up your cabin and knock yourself out. Go get a lion or tiger if you really, really want to. All these things that you're hoping for in the future, you can be making steps towards it today. So yeah, we live off grid. We're enjoying it. And day by day, building cabins, building hutches, planting gardens, doing all that kind of stuff and cleaning up beer cans, all that kind of stuff that we thought we'd be doing. I'm getting to do it.
But you're not having to bury all the dead bodies though, from the Armageddon beforehand, which is great.
Exactly. Exactly. We just have to pick up trash and scrap metal. It's not bad. And the good thing for us is we can take those cans and scrap metal and and build sculptures or build this or that, because we have no building codes. It's
Oh, wow.
ultimate creative freedom to do whatever you want where I'm at. So that really excites me.
Fantastic. Well, brilliant. What's your plans then for going forward as we come to the end of our little stint for this part of the podcast? What have you got planned? Obviously, you're involved in this promoting Witness Underground, which is very exciting. What else have you got going on?
What I've got to do still is I've got a graphic novel about Ernest Hemingway fighting Nazis,
Of course.
loosely historically based,
Oh.
and then drunkenly embellished in true Hemingway style. But I'm hoping to finish that graphic novel and get that out. And then after that, I decided last night I'm going to run for mayor of the town,
Fabulous.
under the pseudonym Mayor McCheese. I don't know if you get that reference or if that's just strictly American. But yeah, that's the plan. But yeah, I'm going to have a whole political campaign of vote for Mayor McCheese. And
Is it going to be the McCheese thing? Does that mean it's going to be a sort of spoof party, or are you going to? Because we have something called the Monster Raving Loony Party in the UK.
The American equivalent is like the Libertarian Party, but I'm apolitical. I don't fit into any kind of box. Definitely not a political box. I just know I travel around this small town and everyone hates the mayor, so I don't know.
Right.
I like my chances.
Yeah.
He's in 2024.
Okay, you heard it here first, folks. Brilliant.
Well, thanks for having me on. Everybody, please back the documentary. It is absolutely amazing. You will enjoy it. You will cry. You might learn something about yourself. Please share it with anybody you think likes good music, good stories. Scott and his team did a tremendous job.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Thank you, Anthony. It's been great to talk to you today. Thank you, Anthony. That was really interesting. And I'm going to ask you, Denise, some of the similar questions, really, because I'm fascinated by, obviously, part of what I said in my introduction is that I'm interested in how people make sense of their life and their world and their identity after leaving this organization. And I think, creatively, that's a big part of that. So maybe just first, if you could just give us a bit of a brief introduction of yourself and who you are, please.
Sure. Well, first thing I want to say is you three are breaking the rules already because you've all got beards and moustaches.
No.
Right? In different stages. I mean,
mine's very grey.
Anthony's gone the whole hog, with
Yes,
his. That definitely wouldn't have been allowed, would it?
Denise, I'm just going to say real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but notice how every ex-Jehovah's Witness guy has a beard. It's
it's so true. Well done. Well, I've been rebellious in a different way. So where shall I start? I was raised from the age of 10. And my mother converted from Church of England in the UK, right. Protestant, I guess you could say. And then she was, she got married pretty rapidly because obviously as a witness, you weren't allowed to sleep with anyone before you got married. And so she was kind of match made with somebody who has already been a witness for 10 years. And then he became an elder. So my pathway was, what do I really want to do? Go and visit my cousins in South Africa. So I saved up some money and did a little job and went to South Africa for 5 weeks, which was freedom because they weren't witnesses, my cousins, So that was great. And then I came back and I wanted to be a model, as you do when you're a teenage girl. And of course, that was no. Every time I thought about it, they'd say something at the convention, of course, modeling wouldn't be a suitable occupation for a young woman. So then I thought, well, I am creative. My mum was creative too. But my options are limited here. So I'll just throw it all in and I'll just become a full-time pioneer. And so I was a full-time minister, which is, as you know, preaching 90 hours a month at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 10 years.
That's really hard. 10 years outside.
Yeah.
Well done.
Life sentence, right?
Yeah.
And then it got worse because obviously I then had to marry within the witnesses and you don't really get to find out who you are and what you need, and so you marry and then regret it later. I can say that because my ex, we're really good friends still. That was 30 years ago. We got divorced and we're still good friends. Wow. And we lived abroad. So in some ways, I wasn't like you. I didn't stay in my hometown. I got away. I lived in Europe, made new friends of witnesses. But when I left, I came back to England and I sought out my long-lost birth father. And he'd left, you know, when he saw my mum was becoming a witness, he was off. And so I started to develop a relationship with that side of my family, which meant I had some support. Then my sister left 3 years later, my long lost sister. So we've been best friends ever since. And we moved to London and just lived the high life, started writing music, worked in the music industry, BMI, which is an American royalties big one, next to ASCAP. And I worked for them for a couple of years and met singer-songwriters, co-wrote, went to showcases. It was great fun that time. Went in the studio, recorded a couple of my own songs with a professional producer. And he'd worked with some celebrities in the past. So that was pretty cool. And I loved it. I loved those songs were great. I kept them as close to my heart, like you would, you know, a piece of jewellery, a valuable piece of jewellery. That was my thing. And then people kept saying to me, "You've got such an interesting story. Why don't you write a book?" I said, "Oh no, you know, never imagined myself to be a writer. I was an artist when I was a witness. That was my first outlet." And then I just thought, well, maybe I could. Started writing. And after about 2 or 3 years, this dark night of the soul descended on me because I'd realised I may be having fun, I may be left the witnesses, but obviously there's a whole lot of heavy stuff that I haven't dealt with yet. And so writing was cathartic but painful. And so at this time, I went into hiatus with everything, didn't do any music either. And it was as if my soul was dying, you know. But I was doing the healing process and came out the other end of it when I moved away from the big smoke. And I came up to very rural East Anglia, which is Norfolk, beautiful coastline all the way around with beaches. And I'm in Norwich, which is a great hub, you know, of art, culture. It was, in fact, the capital of England in the medieval times because it was a rich area because of the wool trade. And London was second to Norwich at the time, can you believe? And so there's still a lot of that vibe and several different universities up here. So there's quite a mix of people. And my creative spirit suddenly came back and I thought, I've got to get that book finished, you know. And so I wrote and then I went on travelling. I had got a fairly good pension from my NBC Universal days in London. That was my last job there, where I was, you know, enjoying being in the movie industry and seeing how it all works, going to free openings and, you know, getting DVDs and everything. And so I had all the media background, and then I just decided to go traveling. So I thought that was probably the part that I really needed to heal, just to feel free, not only of the religion, but also of the, what would you call it, the hamster's wheel, you know, being in a full-time job and not having the energy at the end of the day to do anything creative. And so I never went back to work full-time after that. Managed to wing it. And so I got the book finished while I was in Costa Rica. I was there for 5 months and I was doing my digital nomad thing, you know. I got back, self-published that, and then Scott interviewed me in the summer of 2019.
So what is it? Could I ask you what is it about Witness Underground and the project that was sort of so attractive to you? Why did you want to get involved?
Well, because of the music, obviously. I've actually written some rock music, and then also I've worked in media, and I've kept in touch with Scott since 2019. I was on his Patreon as well, and so I was watching all these interviews that he was doing. And there was a little bit of a ulterior motive as well, because he kept saying, if this is really successful and we get it out there, I'm going to do an international version. And I was like, can I be on it? So now,
Denise is actually my first interview that I did. It wasn't even the podcast. It was like, oh, you have a book and you reached out, like, let's do it. Let's have an interview. So thank you for launching the podcast.
I didn't know I was the very first one. That's great. Yeah, so I've kind of been a loyal follower since then, and just seen him go from strength to strength, and just amazed, at the way
he's so cool, isn't he? He's such a cool guy, isn't he?
Yeah, very cool.
You guys, stop.
Oh, I'm so, I mean, love it. I love it. The way that he's done this indie docu, I call it, is just so full of heart. It's not, as we keep saying in our promotion, it's not just another bad luck story, victim mode, and this is what the witnesses do to you. It was obviously full of great moments and hope and vibrancy and creativity, and just showing how people have grown and blossomed since they've left as well. And so, although I did go through that dark night of the soul, which you have to do, I've just gone mad with my creativity in the lockdown. Once I'd published that book, the whole weight of the whole witness thing was behind me then. So I thought, I can write anything I like now. And I got really into the medieval history in Norwich. So I lived in several different places where there were lots of, undercrofts and ancient buildings and mysterious characters and ghost stories, and you name it, it's just all over the place. I'm so in love with this place. So I chose to write about 3 medieval characters, and I've published that this year. And then during the lockdown, I was also thrown together with a rock musician. So we were in the bubble, literally, just the 2 of us working on music, and we clicked musically. He'd been a professional musician for 14 years and touring the world with some quite famous bands as a session musician, and just getting to know loads of people. This
is Peaceful Cacophony. This is
the
band.
So his name's David Donley.
Okay, cool.
And he's the musician extraordinaire. He does all the instruments and does all the production for the music that we've done together, which is 11 tracks now. And we've actually released them slowly as singles. We've got 3 singles out there. We've got the 4th one about to be released.
Is this Spare Me? Is that the one that you're...
Spare Me was the first one.
You think you're so clever. You are the mountain to my endeavor. You want it all your way. You're in my doorway. I'm on the highway.
Spare Me is just basically spare me from your attitude. It's about me walking away from the witnesses.
Oh, okay.
And just don't want to know. Do you know what I mean? I've got my own life now. So it's a bit of an angry rock song, of course. And then I'd written one in London, which was Set Me Free. And although I wrote it about working in a grey office, in a cubicle, get me out of here. You can just as easily put that to coming out for witnesses or being in a relationship that you really is going nowhere and you really need to get out. So it's, as David says, your writing's great because it's quite generic, and that's a screamer. I've got a bit of a scream going on in that one, which I loved doing. That was really great. At the back of the vocal booth, he just went, go for it, just do that scream. And so I loved that. And then I've done a bit more of a poppy one, which is Sun God, and about my first ever one night stand after I'd left the Witnesses.
Right.
So that's nearly 30 years ago. And then we progressed on from there. We just did ballads. Alt rock is the theme. He's a rock musician primarily. And we've got loads of ideas for videos, and we're just in the middle of all that too. And promoting Scott's movie, obviously very enthusiastic to support other artists and musicians, and especially Scott himself, because, it's going to be successful, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me, I might just let in a couple of people waiting. We'll carry on talking, Denise. But I'll just bring in Mal and Ryan, as they've been waiting in the waiting room there for a bit. So
Mal is Micah Allen Losch, author.
Micah,
and Ryan
right.
Sutter from the movie.
Okay, cool. So joining us now are Ryan Sutter and Micah. So I'll say a quick hello to you guys. I'll come back to you properly, but I didn't want to leave you sat in the waiting room there all on your lonesome. So thanks for joining us, Ryan and Micah.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Thanks
Nice
for
to meet you.
Lovely to see you guys. We're just talking about, we're talking about the documentary, which is, I guess, the whole point. So Denise, what was it? What is it about the documentary in terms of its story that resonates with you? I talked a little bit there with Anthony about the battle that creative people have as members of not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but I would assume other very high demand sort of groups and cults. Can you talk a little bit about your feelings and your experience while you were actually in that organization?
I'm jealous of you guys. I really am, because here in the UK we didn't have anything like that. I hadn't even thought about being a musician in that sense, but we'd always played kingdom songs. My friend was a very good pianist, and she gave me piano lessons. And so what we'd do is get round my house with the piano. She would play, and it would have all the friends round and sing kingdom songs.
Oh my goodness!
So that, and my parents, before they became Witnesses, were actually musicians, folk circle, and they started one of the early English folk circles in the early 60s. And had a folk festival with some quite big names at the time. And I was obviously very young then. And it was in me, I just had that love of the English folk music. So it's still there. I still like acoustic as well. And I write acoustic songs. But I didn't have that outlet as I grew older. I was pioneering, as I mentioned, and then I was a wife and mother, towing the line.
Yeah.
Did a bit of painting. That was about it. So I would say these guys have just nailed it, because they managed to do that, to have that really good expression. Well, especially as rock music wasn't really approved of unless the lyrics were clean and, you weren't saying anything too rebellious.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you guys. You managed to do that and towed the line enough to be able to do what you did, which was fantastic. And so, I just want to support that, because I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd left a lot younger. Obviously, I was 32 when I left. I'd had psychotherapy. I know you've gone into psychotherapy as well, Stephen. So I would say that for me was an essential thing to do. And I luckily did it before I left, because I wasn't very well and I thought there's something wrong with me. Of course, it's all my fault, because as you say, if you start questioning things or you think outside the box, there's obviously something wrong with you. So went along to proper psychotherapy and body therapy, and realized that there was nothing wrong with me at all. It was everybody else. So after 2 years that, and starting to paint and painting with really bold colors in the end, I just felt like my spirit was starting to come back into me, and that's what gave me that shove to leave.
So you didn't feel like you were in the spiritual paradise then when you were Jehovah's Witness?
I was in the spiritual prison. shall we say.
Wilderness.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'd say that I went from rags, spiritually, to riches where I am now, because as Scott knows, I'm not an atheist anymore. I was angry with God for 3 years and didn't believe, but started getting interested in crop circles and spontaneous combustion in the book that I picked up from a charity shop. I thought, what's this all about? And talking with the dead, what's that? So
as a scientist, I'm skeptical, but what I love is that people can find their own way and make sense of their life in the way they do. I just want to say I'm not a psychotherapist, so don't anybody think I'm psychoanalyzing them. No, so I'm different sort of psychology is really broad and complicated, and it's got different sort of wings. But I am interested in the way people think, of course, and how they tick. In our Kingdom Hall, Denise, we had when I was growing up, we had an actual pianist who would play the piano for the Kingdom songs. So I think that was one of the last sort of times that was allowed, because obviously then Kingdom Melodies came out and we all had to just sing along to the records. But that was quite exciting because we had live music in the Kingdom Hall, and we had a musician who came along who ended up being baptized and came into the truth, as they say. Not really, but became a witness, and he was a professional musician, and so we absolutely loved it. It was just great. That was one of the few moments that you had any sort of feeling of creative expression. But he got into trouble for it. Actually, somebody approached him afterwards and said, we think you're putting too many sort of little fiddly bits in between. It's you just want to sort of play it straight for the brothers. So even that little bit of creativity was robbed from us.
Criminal, isn't it? How they squash you. So yes, I definitely had that creativity in me anyway, because my mother's an artist and she was an English and art teacher. And so I had seen that as a child, at least been exposed to some kind of creativity. And of course, it became more and more important for me to purge all this stuff by expressing myself. And as I say, I've written quite a lot of rock songs, some of which are quite angry. And then, I've done ballads recently as well, which you can take whichever way you want. The latest one is Ultimately Nothing Really Ends. And for me, why that was written was David wrote it, and it was supposed to be about romance. And, even if you split up with someone, you still love the person and it never really ends. But of course, my twist on it is I wanted to have it filmed in a graveyard. Cool. So I'm floating around in this hot summer's day, this long floaty dress with gravestones overgrown, in the shadows, and I loved it. So that's coming out soon, hopefully. Cool.
Well, we'll put the links on the show notes for people to go and listen to your tunes. I think that's great, and that's really, really exciting. Cool. Thank you very much for joining us.
I shall go off now, and
you're welcome to stay. But if you're off,
gotta go.
Thank you, Denise. It's been great to have you on the podcast. Thank you. Bye bye.
Good luck, guys, and
great to see you, Denise.
Good to meet you. Bye.
Cool. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. So proper, more formal welcome to Ryan and Micah. So obviously, Ryan, we've spoken to you before. Ryan, thanks for coming back onto the podcast. You're obviously part of the documentary. You're one of the people that's in it. And Micah, I've not spoken to you before, but I've seen some of your stuff. I've actually bought your book and still not got around to reading it, so I'm so sorry. I bought it around Christmas time last year, but I'm still trying to catch up with all the reading. But so let's start with you, Micah. Tell us a bit about yourself and why you got involved in the Witness Underground project.
Okay. Hi, I'm Micah Alan Losch. So Scott reached out to me, and I watched Witness Underground, and I really had to watch it twice because the first time when it ended, it was like I didn't really remember anything, and and then the second time I think I understood a little more. yeah, it was really cool to see a group of people come together in it, and I know for me, my interests were always criminalized by my Kingdom Hall, especially as my I don't know if it was before, but my father died when I was young, and I really got into reading like Stephen King, Edgar Allan Poe. I liked heavy metal, but I was always getting pulled in the back room. It was like everything about me that I liked was wrong, and it I don't know. After years of that, it kind of made me hate myself. But I wrote down my thoughts because I knew off the cuff I wouldn't be articulate. So I think Witness Underground is a great documentary because it features musicians who were told their heart was treacherous, they couldn't trust their minds, and they still embraced their identities. And despite being told they could live forever, they lived in the moment. And I think art that is created under an oppressive regime, especially Christian fundamentalism, is a testament to the human spirit because it's evidence that there is something deep down Watchtower can't touch.
That's beautiful. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're clearly a writer. You should try it.
Yeah. Well, I am editing my third book right now.
Yeah, of course
so
you are. Yeah,
I'm
fantastic.
trying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was joking. Fantastic. I mean, that's something that we were sort of talking to Anthony about as well. The feeling of being a misfit if you're a creative person within a group that itself is kind of that feels like misfits. So you've got this double sort of trouble in that situation. So even the small group that you can be a part of, you don't quite feel right for,
Yeah.
Why were they pulling you up, Micah? What was wrong with you? Why were they bugging you?
Well, I always equated how I felt to I was already an outcast, but among the outcasts, I was a pariah. And I never understood. I noticed immediately after my dad died and his funeral, which wasn't even about him. It was about
Yes, awful.
trying to prey on people to draw them
Yeah.
in.
Mhm.
I missed my father. I was 13. I'm thinking, I don't know how to be a man. And I just could sense this contempt in the congregation. And I had depression, which I think is a normal reaction, but they just hated me for it. And it wasn't until a couple years ago when I was going through the tactics of a cult and how they break people down. And one of them, it was staggering me, but it said cult members must be a walking, talking advertisement for the group because nobody joins when their life is going good. And I wasn't that. I was sad. I was quiet. I developed a very dark sense of humor as a coping mechanism. And what I really needed was just somebody to be like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need to talk? Let's see a movie?" But almost without question, I lived 20 years of just neglect and indifference to my extremely poor mental health at the time.
So let's just sort of dwell upon that. And this doesn't surprise me at all, but the organization kind of blamed you for your depression and for not being a good witness, I suppose, because you weren't shiny and happy all of the time.
Because I had buried my father. How dare I?
Yeah.
And I never grieved because I really don't think Jehovah's Witnesses can grieve because your dead loved one is just dangled in front of you and you're always praying, well, maybe tomorrow will be Armageddon. So you just stagnate and you're caught in that.
Yeah.
And I was told to get over my father. He was sleeping. I'd see him again. And really, my sadness was just it was just criminalized. Like it just it's hard for me to I don't know. I guess to deal with they would do that to somebody because I think about it being done to my child. It really was an insidious thing that not only was perpetuated by my mother, but almost everyone in the congregation.
Yeah, there's this sense of paradise is put off till this point in the future. So actually we don't need to deal with some of these difficult emotional things. We should just sort of brush over them, because that's all going to be sorted in the new order, which means that people have these chronic conditions and they don't really deal with them, because obviously the new order is going to sort all that out, and that goes for lots of things: relationships, personal mental health, and even their doubts and about the organization, about the doctrines, are all kind of, well, we don't need to deal with those now, because that's all going to be sorted out in the future. And I think that's incredibly damaging. And this inability to live in the moment, I think, is part of that. They don't live in the moment. You're encouraged to live for the future. And in the meantime, they're killing you slowly, because you're wasting your life knocking on doors, pounding the streets, going to meetings, going around the hamster wheel.
Oh yeah, it's I mean, they rob you of so many things, but the time, is just, I mean, my mother hasn't spoken to me for 3 years.
I'm sorry.
And it's okay. Thank you. And my father, he had cancer, but when he was dying, they offered him blood, and he willingly said no. He martyred himself for this group. And nobody cared. They don't even really acknowledge, just be proud he died loyal. And I wasn't. I was angry Jehovah didn't save him, because based on what I've been told, I knew that he could. My book of Bible stories, all those horrible things. But I've read all these fantastical tales, and I remember as a child praying very earnestly and pleading with God not to take my father. And I just, it was funny, every time I went to therapy, it would be going well, and they'd say, well, we think like you maybe should pursue your interest and all this, but we think you should leave that religion. And every time they said that, I stopped going. So I went to countless ones, and then they'd always be like, you're not perfect, but we think you are an all right guy. Just maybe this group is, no good.
Yes. Yeah. So I know you went through some quite dark times in your leaving process, and maybe we get you on and talk a bit more in depth at some of that stuff. I mean, obviously you can talk about some of that now if you want to, but I also wanted to talk about how you have used your creativity to help your recovery and your ongoing work that you're doing with yourself, and how you've managed to make sense of life after leaving. So I know you are a prolific writer, so tell us about that and how exciting all that stuff is.
So during COVID, essentially a stick got put in the wheel, and I started to kind of it's weird in hindsight. It's like I don't know how I worked up the courage to really look at like the XJW Reddit, but I knew something was wrong. And I did think COVID was Armageddon. I was in a bad marriage. We're divorced, so no good marriages end in divorce, right? And so kind of after that, it was like there was just nothing left. Fundamentally, I was destroyed. And it was like I didn't even, who am I now? And so I've always loved writing. I always wanted to write or publish a book, and I had written poetry, songs. I can't sing or anything, but all kinds of stuff for about 20 years. So I decided I wanted to tell my story. And certainly my father, he died when I was young, and I was worried something would happen to me while I've been estranged from my child. I see him, but it's just been hard repairing a life. But so with him in mind, I wanted to tell my story, and my story does have a lot of darkness, but I didn't want to, like, it's not flattering. I told my editor, I said, brutally honest, because to not talk about the despair would be a disservice to everyone else who's suffering. So on my 40th birthday last year, I published my first book. I felt like that was a good way of celebrating my birthday for the first time. And then my Mentally Diseased is my memoir's title. And there's a poem before each chapter. And then I had about 100 unused ones that I'd written from age 18 to 38. And so 6 months later, I published a collection of all those titled Gangrenous Speeches. And then I also, the book I'm working on now is called Despicable, and it's a horror novella about the Antichrist. That probably was born out of, people saying I'm an agent of Satan and serve Satan. I mean, I would say spite motivated that, and but I've always just loved horror too. Like I wanted to. Well, I think as I said once, I want to tell people horrifying things in a beautiful way if I can. I've always loved the dark and macabre. So that's probably been my favorite thing I've ever worked on, because I created my own Elohim Seekers. I created my own church and back history and bylaws, and basically all of the church leadership doesn't protect children. They abuse them. So it's kind of it's kind of taking that darkness and putting it somewhere that I feel is more, I mean, certainly better than being anger or violence. And just it's just been really fun to do that. It's been very rewarding, and to create without any restrictions. If I want to use profanity, I don't have to worry about Sister Johnson not liking what it's freedom. It really has been a liberating thing.
Did you feel that then? Did you feel that sort of feeling of liberation when you can just sort of put your thoughts onto that page, regardless of what other people might think? It's this is what I'm doing now.
I did. And I had hoped for closure in telling my story, but I didn't get closure. I got empowerment. I will tell you, that day I felt 10 foot high, and it was just like I just felt like I could bend the universe to my will. And it was like, you know what? They can take everything from me. They can destroy me. They can shun me, but they can't make me not pursue my passion. And that's such a great feeling. I've tried to encourage other XJWs to pursue their passions, because I understand talking about the theology and dogma, but at the same time, that's not my identity. I don't want to break down their ever-changing teachings. I want to pursue what I'm passionate about. And it's led to, crazy things like Scott, asking me to, help him crowdfund for it. Like it was such a cool thing it was like, oh yeah, this is a guy who like gets it. He's doing what he wants, and it's reflecting back at the society and their abuses, but it's not just that. It has its own story, and it focuses on the people that's where it should be.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what is it about the documentary that you like so much? I mean, I've got a couple of favorite moments in it. What for you? What is one of the things you said you had to watch it again because I guess it was quite overwhelming. What are some of the things that you kind of really like about that the documentary, the piece of work?
Well, I thought it was really neat how people connected, and I guess maybe the loyalty. I really didn't experience that. That really wasn't my experience. I basically lived being soft shunned for 20 years. And for me, art saved my life. I also paint. I like to do abstract paintings, but writing, painting, that's what saved my life. I even in my memoir, I talk about once I went to a therapist, and they asked me to name my friends, and I just listed my favorite singers because that's all I had. I didn't have people that spent time with me. And so I thought it was, really cool that they found each other and built this thing. And it seemed like a really awesome, positive experience that personally I felt envy for. And then, the toxicity of Watchtower, like it always does, gets its tendrils in and rips it all to pieces. But these people still, they were, because I think some people, when they talk about being an XJW, they're very contrived a lot of times. They try and present a version of themselves that perhaps isn't them, but I like the vulnerability and the honesty and talking about, the struggle, and, you have to be true to yourself, even if it comes at catastrophic loss. Sometimes you just, that's just the way it is. And I think it's a really great story, and I just haven't encountered much like that. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't mean to ramble, but it just really resonated with me.
Hi, I'm Rhett Sutter, and I'm doing a demonstration tape on the modern audio equipment that our studio has, just in case you want to come and record in our modern studio.
Nuclear Gopher was a record label and online community of Jehovah's Witnesses who all did indie music. It just blew up, but it all stayed in these weird little bounds.
Witnesses can listen to music. It's not like a Footloose situation where like the preacher's like, no music ever, but stuff is frowned upon.
You need to really beware of that disco beat, because that disco beat invites the demons. This is not inviting the demons, it's Lionel Richie.
They think that any moment now, God is going to destroy the world.
At 17, I basically thought to myself, what am I doing? Is this how I want to live my life? Like, do I even believe this?
If they just treated people all right and had some kooky beliefs, I could totally live with it. But friends who committed suicide because they're gay and they're a witness, everything just changed.
Music was my savior at that point.
The moment people started taking it seriously is the moment that someone would start to, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
We started talking, and she's like, well, so if we split up, would you still be a witness? What I actually said was, no, I don't believe any of it anymore. And I never saw her again.
Your wife?
Yeah, I never physically saw her again.
It was an orphan, heathen, fist fight. Before I saw God.
Nuclear Gopher was very special. It created a space for people to be eccentric and creative, and also as healthy as you could be in that culture. And while it lasted, it was like the best.
It's so nice to see people taking something that was so negative and finding a way to create around it and turn it into something creative and something new, which I think is brilliant. Cool. Thank you, Micah. Let's bring in, you're more than welcome to stay while we talk to Scott and Ryan. But if you want to go, that's entirely up to you. But feel free to jump in the conversation. So I'm going to bring in Scott and Ryan together because obviously you two heavily involved in the actual the film. So Ryan, your story is very much featured in the documentary, and Scott, I'm sure our listeners will know that Scott, you're the filmmaker. Tell me how you're feeling about this big push to get the film recognized and out on the streaming platforms and get more people to watch it. Tell us how you're feeling about that.
I feel really excited about it. It's a part of my life that, I've been out of the religion since 2004. So to go back to this and sort of tell this story all these years later, and to I've continued to make music this whole time. Music has continued to play, as is clear in the documentary, a huge role in my life, Chad's life, Cindy's life, Eric's life. We keep doing this. Sorry, my mic is apparently a little hot, so I'm going to dial it back a little bit for you. Hopefully that's okay. Better?
Yeah, that is better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So coming back to this after all these years was kind of a little bit of a gamble for me emotionally, because I had kind of gone through my therapy and gone through all my stuff and sort of moved on with my life. I spent a whole lot of time thinking about a traumatic time period from 18 years ago, and I certainly never thought I'd be going back to doing Nuclear Gopher again. But I'm very excited about all of this because with this story getting out there, and I will say just flat out, I hear what Micah said, I hear what Denise said. People routinely say that they didn't see anything like this when they were in, and I know how special this was, and I knew it at the time, right? Like I was also aware that other congregations didn't have this type of thing, and the way I always thought of it was, the brothers and sisters in the hall were my extended family, and then my immediate family. I didn't really see a big differentiation. And my immediate family, we were all musicians and we did music. So extending what I did with my immediate family to my extended family felt totally natural. It was never like a let's be rebellious, let's be worldly. It was all just let's do the thing we love together with the people we love. And so it felt different at the time, and it felt exciting at the time. And I know that I'm not the only one who felt that. And so to have Scott kind of bring us back here was a little bit worrisome for my part, because I didn't want to be like revisiting old pain and stuff. But the fact that the movies had such a huge reaction from so many people, and so many people resonate with what we present there, feels really good. It feels really validating. I want more people to see it, because I think it's doing a net positive in the world. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I really do hope. I mean, yes, the Kickstarter is a way to like earn, some long overdue, like necessary funding to help get this out to the wider audience. But the end result is to get this out to the wider audience. The end result is that people who need to not feel alone don't feel alone. And so I feel like it was worth doing. That's a long answer to your short question.
It's a great answer. I suppose the nature of films, these sorts of projects, is that it seems to take forever. It takes you a long time to get off the ground. Obviously, the long time writing it, filming it, editing it, and then even longer to get it out to for people to see. You've got the festivals circuit, and then so it's for you, I guess, you're having to come back to it not just once, but again and again and again. So I guess that can be a bit tiring, but I think the reaction to it shows that it really does mean a lot to people.
Well, it's given me some motivation to I never stopped engaging with music, but I stopped thinking anybody cared that I engaged with music. So it's nice to know that people did care about the stuff we did. I owe Scott a mountain of gratitude from my perspective, because as far as I'm concerned, he sort of validated the first 30 years of my life. And I really greatly appreciate that. And, in the last 5 years, Scott has put in 500 years of effort on this film. So, like from that perspective, I'm not going to complain about going back to things, because I didn't have to watch the cut 800 times like Scott did.
Scott, I bet you know every single line of that documentary.
I've caught myself quoting people in their voice inflection. Like I know every single line so perfectly. It's like that part of my brain is used forever on that, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just looking at the Kickstarter numbers at the moment, I mean, it's really exciting. I don't know whether it's on track to where you hoped you'd be, but you're kind of a third way to your target as it stands on Monday the 23rd. So that's pretty exciting, I think.
That feels really good. Yeah, I think we're going to make it. What I've seen from campaigns is that first week you want to do 40%. So we're close to 30%. So we have one more day in our first week, and it'd be great to like get on that track to give us confidence that we're going to get there. We're actually launching something that I think would be great to tell your audience is a match campaign. And we're still collecting some funds for that. So we're going to like lock in the number, and everything's always at the last minute with these kind of things. But that really helps encourage people to go for it, because it's.
So what's that? Tell us what that means.
So some people in our community have offered to put some money together as a collection, but we don't get it unless other people put the same amount forward.
Okay.
And it's in the thousands, some thousands. Cool. And so it's going to be like by Friday, we need get this amount of money in, and then this other bunch of money will flood in, which is really exciting. So hopefully that'll get us where we want to go. But yeah, it's all really exciting. I love it. I was very encouraging to see some people jump on early, and it's not giving us money, it's pledging support. So you don't get charged until we're successful. So if we're not successful, no credit cards get hit. If you are, I mean, it just shows us that there's like a community support for the project.
Yeah,
Thank you so much already.
I think it's, you know, it makes you feel good to be involved in. It's like a lot of things. Whenever you open your wallet in any way, part of that act is because you want to feel good. Whatever it is that you're buying, there's a feel good element to it, and I think there's a massive feel good element to this movie.
And there was something I want to say on that. We crowdfunded the production of this movie, and now we're in the end of the post-production phase. Like, this is just, we did everything. It's done. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
But we want people to know about the film. We want to be able to spread it as far as we can in one big push, like you do any other film release. And we have created everything we ever dreamed of with this project over the last 5 years. Everything we've ever thought of. The soundtrack, of course, is an obvious one because it's a music-based film, but also merch, putting together all the old albums, putting together the DVD, the extras, the special features. Ryan's going to be like slaving away making old school cassette mixtapes and VHSs of the original Nuclear Gopher movies. And there's just so much. And then also someone like Denise and Micah, who've come on today, and Anthony, their books are involved in the project. So you get it's not just the nostalgia piece of Nuclear Gopher. It's not just what's available in Nuclear or Witness Underground, the movie, but also there's a greater movement with Witness Underground podcast guests and artists of all kinds of stripes of ex-witnesses. And, you know, right now it's all ex-witnesses. So in the podcast, we'll eventually expand beyond that, even like ex-cult members, anyone who's left a strong thing. But it's not just something old and nostalgic, like a documentary. It's stuff that's available now. A new book, Micah's new book that's coming out. It's in the campaign. So if you submit it, if you like help us out at a certain level, you're going to get his physical books, all three, the whole trilogy. So
cool. That's great. I looked at the levels, but I didn't look that closely. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad you said that. So yeah, it's very optimistic. It's nice to see that movement of creatives getting together and doing all this really interesting work. How many years ago is it since you did it, Scott? When did you start this project?
So in 2018, in January 1st, I started looking on the internet to see if there was any other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'd never done that before. And we launched March 1st.
Scott. There's none.
There's none. And I decided to like do cultural anthropology research on the internet about this thing I'm a part of, and I found it. And so we launched March 1st, did 1 month campaign like we're doing right now. And that was like, we want to keep doing interviews. And my very first set of interviews was exactly this set of interviews. I think actually Ryan's interview was during that month or the 1 month before the campaign, because I'd already connected with him. But it would just be, the first group was like this group, and it just was like, whoa, having everyone have the same story, not just as an ex-witness, which is what I was doing in general. It was, they all have the same story. They knew each other their whole lives, and they made all this art together, and they have an archive of footage and music, and they also kept making footage and music for years. So it was like, okay, there's something that can like really feels cohesive, and we can make a film out of it. It's not just a YouTube interview series thing. It's much bigger. It can be much bigger than that.
And I think that's remarkable ambition as well. I mean, I really admire that. I guess when you start something like that, you don't necessarily imagine exactly how it's going to be. Or did you? Did you see this day coming?
Yeah, I thought in 6 months I would have a finished movie and it would be on YouTube. And I didn't know how film festivals worked. And I've written to so many people like, no, this is not a thing you do alone. This is, and I haven't done it alone, to be honest. Like, if you look at the credits, there's like 40 people have done something over that time. And that's why credits are gigantically long. And we all wonder why we're watching the credits scroll, but it's because those people put something really important in the film.
Yeah,
and I'm
watch the
grateful
credits,
to every one of
people.
you.
Yeah, watch the credits. Stay till the end. Keep watching those credits. That's what I say. Yeah, cool. So Ryan, I saw on Facebook that you are involved in, or you've been doing some work at home. You're putting a studio together. Is that finished now? Are you kind of done with that? Or?
It is. I'm in it. This is it's
cool.
a blurred background, but
okay.
I am joining you from the Nuclear Gopher.
Cool.
This is the actual studio. There's sort of two rooms. One of them can be subdivided into 2 rooms, so that could be 3 rooms. There's kind of a lounge area, then there's like a kitchenette, and then there's the main control space, and then there's a separate room. I have been doing sessions down here with some new artists who have nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses, believe it or not, just normal people recording music because they like to make music. And so yes, and then I've also been working on finishing up my first album in close to 10 years. And that's called Capistrano. That's going to be coming out in November. And also working on the soundtrack, and also working on 3 other releases for a relaunch to Nuclear Gopher. So Nuclear Gopher is not a nostalgia thing, to Scott's point. This is a re-established functioning recording studio working on new releases and new music and new stuff. And that's gonna, right now, if you go to nucleargopher.com, you get our 1998 splash page with a sign up link on it, which feel free to sign up for that newsletter, because then it'll let you know when the real thing comes. But the nucleargopher.com is coming back, and I'm working on that in addition to supporting this. So keeping busy on that, and I'm kind of excited about it, because even though Nuclear Gopher went on shutdown mode in 2005, I've been very musically active. I haven't released a solo album in the better part of a decade, but I've been in 4 other bands. I've been recording, doing other stuff, doing other music. So it's fun to get back to it. I'm really looking forward to getting a solo album back out again. I think it's the best one I've ever done. Some of the songs are in the movie soundtrack, so that's exciting. And there may be some more stuff coming from Eric and Cindy too, but I'm not going to give too much detail away on that.
Teaser.
New Capistrano album is in the campaign as well, so you're basically getting a pre-order of his new record. If you at certain levels, so you have to look for Capistrano.
Yep. So we keep mentioning this Kickstarter page. Obviously, the link will be on the show notes. Clearly, if you just type Kickstarter and Witness Underground into Google or any other browser,
you can just go to witnessunderground.com and you'll wind up there.
It'll be there. Cool. So it's easy to find, and there's various different levels that people can help support it.
Even if they don't want to give money, they please raise awareness of it. Share it to your social networks. Share it on Twitter, X, whatever the heck that is now. We want to get people. We want to widen this awareness. So if you don't got a dime to give, fine. But if you can let some people know about it, appreciate it.
Yeah. At the risk of triggering anybody, advertise.
The rock stars and The Rock.
Yeah, exactly. No, you got it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great. I was just wondering, Micah, you're obviously writing your own story, but you've also written some fiction. So have you ever thought about trying to get some of that onto the screen, or the small screen or the large screen? Have you ever thought about writing for TV or film?
Me?
Yeah.
It's since I was 18, I just wanted to publish a book. Right. So crazy things have happened, and it hasn't even been a year, but I just considered it all gravy. It's just like, I was just like, okay, like that's a dream. And then somebody asked me last year, they're like, what are you going to do the next year? And I was like, any other time I've been asked that, I thought, well, I hope Armageddon comes next year. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I did one book. So yeah, it's just been kind of pursuing things that are uncomfortable, because for me, in the countless hours I've spent thinking, I just feel like everything that it feels comfortable is unhealthy, because growing up in a cult, you're not taught boundaries, you're not taught anything really good. So nothing crazy, but I've just kind of tried to lean into things that feel a little uncomfortable. So I mean that's a crazy idea. Who knows? Maybe someday. You never know.
Write a screenplay. So Celine and I, when we started the podcast, the year before, we'd actually started a small production company as a father and daughter project. So that was our first father and daughter project, was to start a little film production company, and we made a mockumentary called Dissonance. This was before we did any sort of cult stuff, but somehow it got called Dissonance. And our next project was we're writing a screenplay for a sort of sci-fi thing, and that's kind of stopped now, but Celine wants to resurrect that. So yeah, writing a screenplay is really interesting, because I'd never done anything like that before. I'd written creative pieces like novels and short stories, nothing as, you know, professional as yours, but that discipline was completely different. I was really blown by how different that process is. The way that you're writing a screenplay, it's not like I expected. It's just kind of another version of writing a book. It's very different in the way that it's written, and the sort of dynamism that you have to put in when you're writing a screenplay. So yeah, might be worth having a crack at something like that, Micah. There you go. I've given you an idea.
I did start work on a fourth book, but and then I was like, wait a minute, I got to finish the editing, but I don't really like that part. But yeah, I do have like some more ideas. I've thought about a collection of short stories, kind of. I have an idea for a witch. I really want to write about topics that were taboo, because not only do I enjoy that, but I also know it pisses people off, and I like that. So
I call that the inner teenager. A very strong inner teenager.
Yeah.
Micah, I might want to get your help on something. James and I, also Zimmerman from the documentary, we were discussing the other day the fact that 20 years ago we made a movie that is called Press One Now, and it does appear briefly in the documentary. It ends on a cliffhanger, and we never made the rest of it. And we thought it would be funny to come back and make the conclusion to Press One Now, where the main character, which is me, Mr. Movie Phone, he's 20 years older, and he's reminiscing. And so anyways, we might need some help, Micah, with putting together a screenplay for a follow-up to our unfinished cliffhanger masterpiece from 2002. Just throwing it out there.
What about that?
Sounds cool, definitely.
There's also 2 horror film trailers that Ryan and James worked on that are also in Witness Underground, and some of their footage is featured in our little pitch video for Kickstarter, because it's awesome and dramatic. And we're talking about shunning, so I was like, yeah, this fits for that emotional part of like dissonance and creating chaos in the mind. But those films also never got made. Those are trailers for films that don't exist, horror films that now we could make because they're not taboo. It'd be fun to just pursue that.
Yeah, we had a thing for a little while where we would get together to make movies, and we would just say, do you have any ideas? And one night we got together and nobody had any ideas, and we said, all right, let's just film a bunch of clips from a horror film that doesn't exist. We'll just try to let the audience try to figure out what the story's supposed to be. And so we just came up with every insane thing we could come up with, including grilling my wife's head and stabbing people and all this insane stuff. And then we edited it into this trailer for this non-existent horror film called Nursery Rhymes. And then we did the sequel, which was 2 Nursery, 2 Rhymes. And then, so if we ever really wanted to make the movie, that would be amazing.
Sounds awesome. Great. I'm excited. Coming up to Halloween, it's just the right time to start thinking about those sorts of things. Scott, what have you got planned then for the future? What's so this, obviously you've got lots of stuff going on here. We don't want to detract from that, but what are your thoughts for what you're doing next?
The next creative project. So I have a film I shot on the 1st of the year over the Christmas, New Year holiday, 2022, 2023, following a young woman who I met in Vietnam at a metal show. She had the same camera as me, and I went and talked to her, and then we became friends, and then she moved back. She's also grew up in the States, but she's a rock climber. So I shot this thing about like musicians who live out of their cars in the wild in the US all year round, and they rock climb and free solo, and they're like wild humans living out of vehicles. And the surprise to me was that they're also musicians. So I'm like, I'm going to shoot this thing following my friend Kate, Kate O'Flaherty, Chinese name. She was raised by Irish parents, adopted. Anyway, so there's an adoptive story, which I really appreciate about her. I'm not sure if she still wants to dive into that because it's like very traumatic still. But when I met her, she was trying to find her biological parents.
Oh, wow.
And she found them. And then she was decompressing from that trauma at 18, 20 years. So it was like 20, 21-year-old thing that happened. Now she's like in her late 20s. Anyway, so we filmed this whole thing. So I shot this whole thing, and it's very much like back to my roots, like single camera. I'm like really dangling off of a rock most of the time, following her climbing, and then she does interview. So this whole thing I made that I haven't edited yet, and so I want to work on that. And I also did this crazy thing. 2 things. It's new. It's fresh. I have for the first time in my life traveled with 2 suitcases. So I just moved to Panama. But before I came here, I was like, I have to go back to my stored stuff and get my Jehovah's Witness leather briefcase that it looked like a tattered piece of garbage when I was using it in the 90s, but it was from the 70s. In that briefcase I've kept all these years are all of my mastered cassette tapes, the original DVD that I have from the last time my band performed as Waking Life, which was the Jehovah's Witness band that I had. And before that, we were ADD Chronicles, and I shipped a bunch of that stuff to Ryan. He's like digitally archiving it. But in there were all my journals from like 15 to 23 years old.
Oh, wow.
So the idea is to like make a memoir, and it's going to be heavy, I think, but also like self-help. So I want to like mix it with like a little bit of, because in that's like all the music and all the cool stuff I was doing with my like worldly band, my like normal humans band from high school. And then the transition to like forming a band in the Witnesses, and like all my weird church notes from conventions mixed with like the girls I thought were cute, and like sketches, and like also terrible poems and lyrics that are like cringy but also revealing, and I'm like swearing up a storm as like an 18-year-old, like, I can't believe I have to deal with this shit, it sucks, like why am I stuck in this situation? And it's just ranting and like heaviness, and then like I think she's cute and like dumb rhymes. I don't know, I'm not going to do any right now, but like it's like so cringy to read, but I think it's revealing of like my life with all the cognitive dissonance I was living with. So it could be interesting to dive into bad poetry and bad lyrics.
And
and then some okay songs.
That is, yeah, sounds great. I mean, that is such a personal thing, isn't it? I never kept a diary, so I've got nothing to go back to. The only thing I've got to go back to are some 4-track cassette tapes that when I was, how old was I? About 20. I bought one of these 4-track recording studio things that used tapes, but obviously it used 4-track, and you could record 4 tracks and then bounce it over to 1 and so on. So I recorded some songs on there, and I've still got them, but I've not played them for years. So that's my sort of last bit of history, I think, still left when I was a witness, you know.
A lot of what's in Witness Underground from the Nuclear Gopher archive is actually 4-track cassette, or even something even more primitive than that. Ryan discussed a little bit what it is, but that's it can be in a movie someday. You could soundtrack a movie with those stories.
You know, I'm actually in the process for the purpose. I mean, all the Nuclear Gopher stuff that all the old recordings have been out available on like Creative Commons releases and stuff for a long time, but in order to make it more exciting for people who are just joining the party here, I'm actively going to be reissuing and remastering and cleaning up. And there's some awesome new software these days that lets you do some pretty great things, even with your old 4-track recordings. So they already sound 1,000 times better than they ever did back in the day. Thank you, Isotope. I'm not going to advertise their products directly, or too much, but man, it's magic what you can do to get rid of tape hiss and remaster and remix things these days. So that's something that's going to be ongoing. I will be doing reissues, especially of like the Lavone, which was kind of the band that started all of this. And I've got like literally right over there is an archive of 100 4-track tapes. So they're all here. It's all still doable, and it's a really fun thing for me to work on these days. So, and then Scott's I've got the box with Scott's too. So his stuff is now officially part of the Nuclear Gopher Preservation Society.
Very
what
good.
kind of music was yours, Stephen?
Mine. I was sort of just solo singer songwriter, guitar. Just the one song I remember was the lyrics were all about how science and evolution is actually just a religion, and they dress in white coats like they're sort of religious leaders, and I mean, I'm a staunch evolutionist now and confirmed atheist, so I but that was me back then, and I think that was me trying to convince myself. This was me convincing myself about something I really wanted to believe, and I did a lot of that in my life. So yeah, it'd be quite interesting to listen to it again. I do remember those lyrics though, so yeah, slightly embarrassing, but that's where I was.
This idea of like looking back at who you were, this idea that there's a connection to that person. I mean, there is through history, but like it's almost like a different person when you look back. Like, who was that? Where was that mind? What did they believe? It's almost like a separate individual. And I think it's interesting to capture that in a book or in a lyric or a poem or a song.
That whole question to me is a bit of an obsession as a psychologist. It's the thing that I kind of want to study, because the whole question of identity and personality and our sense of self, and who we are and who we become and how we tell a story about who we were. Because I strongly believe that part of the job, part of our mission when we leave an organization like Jehovah's Witnesses is to find a way to tell a consistent or a coherent story. If you see it as a complete break with your old self, I think that creates psychological difficulties. So for me, the fact that I can look back to old Stephen and understand what he was doing back then, and it's still part of who I am now, feels important. But I want to investigate and explore that. So that's kind of something I want to do for the future. So Ryan, you had a thought there.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to share. There was a guy. He was a Chad. He wasn't the Chad who's in the film, but he was in one of the bands, and his dad was a presiding overseer in our congregation, and we used to do a lot of recording at their place. And I remember having a conversation with his mom once about why he became a musician, why he got into doing music. And he said she was like, we used to tell him about the paradise, we used to tell him about the future and about all this stuff and the lamb and the lions and whatever, and it was all boring to him. And then he got a guitar and he was like, oh, this is something I could do forever. And so suddenly he became obsessed with like wanting to live forever and the whole thing, because he loved making music so much. He never wanted to stop. And I think about that a lot, because I kind of like, that actually was, believe it or not, kind of a motivation for all of this, as ironic as it is in retrospect. We weren't doing this to get out. We were doing this because it was like, oh, well, we're going to live forever. Let's do something we love. And, and it's funny because it was, we had to invent our own DIY world because it was the only way to control it enough to keep doing it while still staying true to what we believed. But it just, sometimes I hear people talk about it and it's so flip side from how I experienced it, where it's kind of like, well, we were trying to do music and it was this kind of rebellious spirit and people were against it, when I'm like, yeah, like it was like, that was the reason. It's like, oh, I got to have something to do for the next 2,000 years.
2 billion years.
Yeah, 2 billion years. I mean, I don't know at what point you get sick of playing a guitar, but I haven't gotten there yet. So
yeah. Cool. Right. I feel like we're coming to a natural end of our conversation today, and thank you so much to our previous guests. So thank you to Anthony and to Denise. Thank you to you guys here, to Micah, and to Ryan, and obviously to Scott. Scott, you've got the final word. So what do people need to do?
2 things. Witnessunderground.com right now redirects to our Kickstarter campaign. So it's easy to remember, witnessunderground.com. Check it out and like watch our video. And then if you feel like contributing, great, that's amazing. It supports us. We don't get any money if we don't hit our number. And the other thing you can do if you don't want to contribute, or if you're hesitant but you want to help out, you can simply like, comment, and share on our Facebook pinned video on Witness Underground landing page on Facebook. And also we're on Instagram and Twitter and a few other places. So anywhere you are, like, comment, interacting with that helps hack the algorithm, and it doesn't boost it just to your, like, when you share it doesn't just go to your network. When you interact with it, Facebook algorithm like boosts it beyond your network. So just like interacting with what we've created, it does something behind the scenes that helps us out. But share it with your people if you can. If you love it, like, private message people about it. Anyway, spread the word in any way you can, I guess, the point. Sure. But witnessunderground.com is the main place, and then anywhere on social media. Thank you so much.
Doing it once is great, but I guess if you do it more than once, that's also good. So sometimes I feel like, oh, I've done this already, but I'm trying to do it more than just the once. I guess that's useful.
Yeah, what we've learned from this campaign, we hired a professional to like learn how to run a campaign, and he's also now on our production team to help us release the film. He's been doing this like over 320 times he's released films. He's someone I trust. He worked with him on the film festival run. He said that sharing the same thing to your personal Facebook every single day once is how people will see it for the first time. Like, I have 2,000 plus friends on Facebook. They're not obviously close friends, but the people I've met in my life. And he's like, they won't even see it because the algorithm throttles whatever you share. And you're also competing with like those people's birthdays in the notification list. And that's where it actually shows up in like in a little list that you have to click on to see what it is. No one's going to see it in their feed. Who looks at their feed? And it's going to get buried in other stuff. And you're competing with world news, wars, and freshly baked cookies. And like, we're just trying to get the message out, and we have a short window to do so. We're trying to do like a year's worth of marketing in like 30 days of time. So if you share it every single day, your friends might actually see it, and they will be thrilled to see it because it's a piece of art that's important, not world news and war and politics.
Yeah.
And I will make a personal guarantee that if you haven't seen the film, so you're like, I don't know if I want to promote it or not, when you see the film, you'll wish you had. It's really good. It's
and
really
this is a guy who's it's about, like, that's also an interesting thing about Ryan and I. I'm a director who's gone out to tell a story, and he's the subject of the film, right? But we're like, he loves the film, you know, like that says something. And it's really,
if I hated the film, I would be trying to knock it down, honestly. Like,
wouldn't it be an embarrassing interview if that was the case?
Right.
Well, there was a lot of ways this could have gone wrong. I trusted Scott, and it paid off. But there's a lot. I was nervous. I was nervous 5 years ago. I'm not nervous anymore.
Yeah, it's just right. It's just so, you know, it's really just hits the spots for me. Micah, Ryan, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and masses of luck with all your projects that are going on. Really appreciate you coming on. Cool Hackers, thank you again. Bye.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.